what's left of the reflection. I always believed our house harbored secrets, nestled within its creaking walls and under the loose floorboards. But nothing prepared me for the evening my daughter, Lily, came to me, her face pale as the moon, whispering, "Mommy, why doesn't my reflection look like me?" I followed her to her room, where the antique mirror stood like a silent sentinel. There, in the glass, was Lily's reflection, but it was wrong. The smile was too wide, too knowing, and the eyes were pits of darkness that seemed to swallow the light. Each night, the reflection's grin grew more grotesque, and its eyes darker. Lily stopped sleeping, and I found her often, standing before the mirror, conversing in hushed tones with her other self. I overheard her once, asking, "What do you want?" The reflection's reply sent chills down my spine, "To be seen." The air grew colder with each passing day, and the house seemed to groan in protest. I decided to cover the mirror, but that night, the sounds of shattering glass echoed through the house. Rushing to Lily's room, the mirror was intact, but the reflection was gone. In its place, a void that seemed to beckon us closer. We left the house, seeking refuge with my sister. But even there, in the safety of her modern apartment, I caught glimpses of that eerie smile in reflective surfaces, the TV screen, windows, even in my sister's eyes. Lily's behavior became erratic. She'd laugh at nothing or whisper to empty corners. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood, Lily vanished. I searched frantically, my heart racing, until I found her in the bathroom, the lights flickering, her small hand reaching towards the mirror. Her reflection was back, but it wasn't her. It was something else, something sinister, wearing my daughter's skin like a costume. As I pulled her away, the reflection spoke, its voice a symphony of nightmares. "You can't leave us. We are a part of you now." I held Lily tight, vowing to never let her near another mirror. But as we turned to leave, I caught my own reflection. It was smiling back at me, eyes as black as the void that had taken residence in our home. The days blurred into a single, unending nightmare. Lily's condition worsened. She spoke less and less, her eyes always fixed on something I couldn't see. I caught her whispering to shadows, her words a jumbled mix of pleas and threats. "They're watching," she'd say, her voice barely above a breath. "They're always watching." I sought help from every source I could think of, doctors, priests, even a medium who fled our home, her face ashen, muttering about dark presences. No one could help us. The reflection, or whatever it had become, was tethered to Lily, an invisible chain that grew tighter with each passing hour. One night, as a storm raged outside, the power flickered and died. In the candlelight, I saw them, figures in the shadows, their eyes like the reflections, voids of pure darkness. They whispered Lily's name, their voices a cacophony of discordant tones that seemed to claw at the very air. I did the only thing I could think of. I took Lily and ran. We drove without direction, the rain a relentless assault on the windshield. In every reflective surface, I saw them, a legion of smiling, dark-eyed specters. They were in the rearview mirror, on the wet streets, in the windows of the shops we passed. They were everywhere. We found an old motel on the outskirts of town, its neon sign flickering like a beacon of false hope. The room was musty, the air thick with the scent of decay. But it was a haven, a place without mirrors, without reflections. For a moment, I believed we might be safe. As Lily slept, I watched over her, the knife I had taken from the kitchen clenched in my hand. I heard them before I saw them, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. They were in the room with us, their forms barely visible in the darkness. "Give her to us," they hissed. "She belongs to us." I stood, ready to defend my daughter to my last breath. But then, the whispers stopped. The figures receded into the darkness, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, a single, chilling laugh broke the stillness, and I knew our fight was far from over. The motel room felt like a tomb, the silence oppressive, suffocating. I watched Lily's chest rise and fall with shallow breaths, her face serene in sleep, a stark contrast to the turmoil that surrounded us. The whispers had ceased, but their absence was no comfort. It was the calm before the storm, a momentary reprieve in our relentless nightmare. I dared not sleep, my every sense alert for the return of the shadows. The knife's handle was slick with my sweat, its blade catching the faint light from the neon sign outside. Time lost meaning as I sat there, waiting, praying for dawn to break the night's hold. But the darkness was patient, and when the whispers returned, they were different, urgent, angry. "She is ours," they hissed, the sound like sandpaper against my skull. "You cannot protect her forever." I stood, my resolve hardening. "I can, and I will," I whispered back, defiance my shield against their malevolence. The shadows coalesced into forms, more substantial than before, their eyes burning holes in the fabric of reality. They advanced, a tide of darkness that threatened to engulf us. I stood between them and Lily, the knife poised and ready. "Stay back," I warned, my voice steady despite the terror that clawed at my insides. They laughed, a sound that fractured the air, and in that moment, the veil between worlds tore asunder. The room filled with light, blinding and pure, and from it stepped a figure, Lily's true reflection, her eyes clear and bright. "Mommy," she said, her voice a balm to my frayed nerves. "You have to let me go." I couldn't comprehend, couldn't accept her words. "No," I sobbed, "I won't lose you." But she smiled, a smile of infinite sadness and love. "You never will," she assured me. "But I have to leave you now. It's the only way to save us both." The shadows recoiled from her radiance, their forms dissolving like mist in the sun. I held Lily's hand, tears streaming down my face, as she stepped into the light. And then, with a final, loving glance, she was gone. The room was silent once more, the neon light flickering its lonely vigil. I was alone, truly alone. But as I looked into the mirror, I saw not my reflection, but Lily's, her eyes as blue as the sky on a clear summer day. She smiled, and I knew she was at peace. But then, the smile twisted, morphing into something cruel, and the eyes darkened to an abyssal black. The laughter returned, cold and mocking, and I realized the horror was far from over. Story 2. The Vanishing Lineage. I had always been fascinated by the dusty corners of our old family home, where whispers of the past seemed to linger like cobwebs. It was during one of my explorations that I stumbled upon a box of old family photos in the attic. The musty scent of age wafted up as I lifted the lid, revealing layers of sepia-toned memories. But as I sifted through the images, a chill ran down my spine. In the first photo, a grand family reunion, I noticed my great-uncle, who had always been the life of the party, was missing from the cheerful group. Thinking it was an odd coincidence, I shuffled to the next photo, only to find that my grandmother, once seated at the head of the dining table, was now just an empty chair. With each photo, the pattern continued, relatives faded away, leaving behind vacant spaces and unclaimed objects. The realization hit me like a thunderclap. These were not mere photos, but a record of something far more sinister. As night fell, the house groaned under the weight of silence. I couldn't shake the feeling of unseen eyes watching me from the dark corners. I decided to confront my parents about the photos, but their bedroom was empty, their beds untouched and cold. Panic set in, and I raced back to the attic, the photos now my only link to my vanishing family. The attic was different at night, shadows stretching like grasping fingers. I pored over the photos again, searching for clues, when I heard a soft whisper, "Look closer." My hands trembled as I brought a photo to the dim light. There, in the background, was a figure I hadn't noticed before, a shadowy silhouette that seemed to be present in each disappearing act. The whisper had come from nowhere and everywhere at once, a voice like the rustling of dry leaves. My heart pounded as I peered into the darkness, half expecting the shadowy figure from the photos to materialize before me. But there was only silence. I turned my attention back to the photographs, my eyes tracing the outline of the mysterious silhouette that had invaded my family's history. With each photo, the figure grew clearer, and I began to notice details I had missed before, a faint smirk, a glint of something sinister in its stance. It was as if this entity fed on the presence of my loved ones, absorbing them into the void. The air grew colder, my breath visible in the attic's stale air. I wrapped my arms around myself, not just for warmth, but for a sense of security that was quickly slipping away. I needed answers, and the only place left to look was the family archives. Tucked away in a forgotten corner of the attic was a chest filled with journals and letters dating back generations. The dust made me cough, but I persisted, flipping through pages yellowed with age. That's when I found it, a journal entry from my great-great-grandfather, detailing a curse placed upon our family by a vengeful spirit, a shadow that would erase us from existence one by one. The story unfolded with each turn of the page. My ancestor had wronged a powerful entity, and in retaliation, it promised to haunt our lineage forever. I slammed the journal shut, my mind racing. Was this the price of sins long past? I quickly realized the implications. I was next. I decided to confront the shadow, to plead for the return of my family. As I spoke the words, the photos began to flutter as if caught in a breeze, though the air was still. A low hum filled the room, growing louder until it was all I could hear. And then, silence. I looked up to see the shadow standing before me, its form more defined than ever. Why? I managed to choke out. The shadow tilted its head, considering me, before it whispered a single word that chilled me to the bone. The word hung in the air, a whisper that seemed to echo through the very walls of the house. Repay. The shadow's demand was simple yet impossible. How could I repay a debt incurred by an ancestor whose sins were not my own? The shadow seemed to read my thoughts, its form blurring and shifting, as if it were a smudge of darkness on the fabric of reality. I pleaded, my voice breaking with desperation. How can I repay what I do not owe? The shadow remained silent, its presence a cold void that threatened to swallow me whole. I realized then that it was not seeking repayment in kind, but in spirit. It wanted a life for a life, a soul for a soul. The photos lay scattered at my feet, the faces of my family fading even from my memory. I could not let this entity take everything from me. There had to be another way. I scoured the journals for a solution, for any mention of a reversal or a ritual that could banish the shadow. And then, amidst the frantic pages, I found it, a ritual that could anchor the shadow to a physical form, rendering it powerless. The ingredients were bizarre but obtainable, a lock of hair from a loved one, ash from a tree struck by lightning, and a tear shed in true sorrow. I had the first two, but the last would require me to relive the pain of my losses, to truly mourn what the shadow had taken from me. As I began the ritual, the house seemed to breathe with me, the walls creaking in anticipation. I placed the items in a circle, my hands shaking as I lit the candle that would complete the binding. The shadow watched, its form wavering as the ritual took hold. It let out a scream that was not of this world, a sound that could shatter souls. And then, just as the candle flickered out, the shadow lunged at me, its form solidifying into something grotesque and human. I stumbled back, my heart racing as I realized the ritual had worked, but at what cost? The figure before me was no longer just a shadow, it was a mirror of my deepest fears, a manifestation of the family curse standing in the flesh. It smiled, a twisted grin that promised the game was not over. You think you've won, it hissed, but this is only the beginning. The end. Subscribe for more. Thank you.